Initially, it seemed like just another ordinary call for a minor repair, devoid of any particular significance. I had given it little consideration. At 60, I found myself in a serene, unchanging existence, a life devoid of the thrilling stirrings of longing for more time than I wished to acknowledge. Yet, on that Wednesday afternoon, as Jacob crossed the threshold of my door, brimming with youthful vigor and an endearing nervousness, I sensed a subtle transformation within me. An innocent moment quickly transformed into a perilous situation. Our meetings, once characterized by professionalism, gradually transformed into a landscape rife with tension. As I traversed realms I had yet to discover, the distinction between necessity and fixation began to fade. This was unforeseen, an unexpected turn of events, yet it stirred something within me that demanded my attention. For days, I found myself fixated on the dripping sink, observing the water gather in the basin, a persistent symbol of my neglect for the world around me. After years of meticulously crafted home enhancements, a sense of futility enveloped the space, as it felt devoid of meaning without a companion to share it with. The house had expanded beyond comfort after my divorce, every room resonating with memories I wished to forget. The kitchen, once the heart of our family gatherings, now languished in a state of silent neglect, mirroring my own decline. When the sink leak reached a point that could no longer be overlooked, I took a step I hadn't taken in ages. I reached out for assistance. I discovered a nearby handyman. Jacob was merely a name, a figure in the shadows, someone to fulfill a task. I envisioned a weathered figure, seasoned by time, perhaps with a few jagged imperfections that hinted at a life well lived. As I swung open the door on that brisk Wednesday afternoon, I was met with the sight of a young man, perhaps in his 20s. Jacob loomed above me, a toolbox clutched in his hand, clad in a plain gray shirt that hugged his muscular frame. His smile was tinged with nervousness, failing to illuminate his eyes, yet there was an undeniable allure about him that captivated me from the start. "Greetings, I have come to inspect the sink," he remarked, his voice resonant yet gentle. I blinked, momentarily taken aback by the subtle flutter of my heart within my chest. It was, in truth, a reaction steeped in absurdity. At my age, those fleeting sparks were meant to be relics of a bygone era, and yet there it was, a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in years. "Come in," I managed to say, stepping aside to allow him entry into the house. He glided through the room, his gaze meticulously surveying the kitchen with a serene intensity. He worked with a certain efficiency, kneeling to examine the sink, his hands gliding expertly over the pipes. I found myself hovering in the vicinity, captivated and unable to tear my gaze away. I lingered near the kitchen island, feigning preoccupation with an unimportant task, yet my gaze remained fixed on him. There was an undeniable quality to his movements, the power in his arms as he secured the bolts beneath the sink, the serene focus that graced his features. It had been years since I found myself this near to a young man. It hadn't crossed my mind what it might entail until this very moment. An inexplicable sensation stirred within me. It transcended mere appearances, although Jacob's allure was impossible to overlook, active in a raw, unstudied manner. No, it was the energy he infused into the room, a vitality that stood in stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped my existence. He exuded a warmth, a sensation I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. For a fleeting instant, I found myself propped against the counter, observing him with an intensity that felt almost intrusive. I adjusted my robe, a garment I had never deemed provocative until this moment, and stood tall, attempting to dispel the absurd thoughts that were infiltrating my mind. Jacob lifted his gaze from his tasks, meeting my glance. I noticed the brief flash of surprise in his expression as his eyes swept over me, only to quickly return to the sink. His cheeks tinged with a delicate hue, and a subtle thrill coursed through me at the sight of his reaction. It was innocent enough, yet I sensed a stirring within me that I had long suppressed: desire. I approached the spot where he knelt, observing his focused efforts. He maintained his focus, yet an undercurrent of nervousness flickered in the movement of his hands, as if he were striving to avoid acknowledging my presence too overtly. "Is everything proceeding smoothly down there?" I inquired, my tone gentler than I had meant it to be. He inclined his head, his gaze fixed downward. "Indeed, merely a minor leak. It will be resolved shortly." I found myself unable to resist. I extended my hand and softly pressed it against his shoulder, offering a tender squeeze. His body tightened beneath my touch, and I experienced a rush of exhilaration that accompanied the realization of my influence over him. A sensation long forgotten washed over me, and I found myself unwilling to release it just yet. "You're incredibly strong," I remarked, my voice adopting a subtly playful lilt. He glanced up at me, taken aback, his cheeks deepening in color. "Thank you kindly." I offered him a gentle, understanding smile. The tension between us was palpable, saturating the air in the confined quarters of my kitchen. It lingered in the air, a silent presence that needed no words. He shifted uneasily, making an effort to maintain his professionalism. Yet the subtle tremor in his hands as he secured the final bolt revealed all I needed to understand. I edged a bit nearer, bending over the counter, observing his every action with keen interest. He rose to his feet, cleansing his hands with a rag, and I noticed how he averted his eyes, striving to uphold his poise. "Do you require any assistance?" I inquired, fully aware that he did not possess the knowledge. He shook his head briskly, concentrating on stowing away his tools, yet his hands trembled uncontrollably. I extended my hand once more, allowing my fingers to lightly graze his arm, savoring the warmth of his skin beneath my touch. He paused, and I could perceive the silent battle unfolding within his gaze. A fragment of his being yearned to surrender, I could sense it, yet a fragment of his being recognized the truth. He was younger, and I was a woman who ought to have been wiser as well. Yet, in that instant it held no significance. I allowed my hand to rest on his arm, sensing the tension between us spark with an electric charge. He gazed at me, his breath quickened, his eyes large and filled with doubt. For a fleeting instant, I believed he would advance, bridging the gap that separated us. Yet he chose instead to retreat, shattering the enchantment. He faltered, his voice trembling. "I'm merely here to repair the sink," I said with a gentle smile, finding his flustered demeanor quite amusing. "Are you certain there isn't anything else that requires attention?" I inquired, my tone playful. At that moment he appeared torn, caught in a dilemma between the urge to remain and the instinct to flee. His hands shook as he collected the final remnants of his tools, and I could perceive the battle within him to keep his composure intact. I moved in closer, my lips mere inches from his. "There's an additional task you might attend to for me," I murmured, my tone soft and enticing. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on me, immobilized in that moment. I leaned in, poised as if to kiss him once more, but just before I could bridge the distance, he stepped back swiftly, raising his hands in a gesture of defense. "Can't," he said, shaking his head. "I truly cannot." I sulked, a hint of disappointment creeping in, yet I understood he wouldn't relent, at least not for the moment. He dashed out in a frenzy, nearly sprinting from the house, while I remained there in the kitchen, once more left to my solitude. Yet, there was an undeniable quality to his departure. The atmosphere was thick with more than just awkwardness. A palpable tension lingered, an unfinished business, an unresolved feeling that refused to dissipate. Deep within me, I understood that Jacob's refusal wasn't born from a lack of interest. Rather, it stemmed from his own uncertainty about his ability to resist the allure of a yes. The subsequent days unfolded as a curious blend of exhilaration and vexation. My thoughts were consumed by Jacob, by the way he had paused, the way his gaze had held on to me for just a moment too long. Years had passed since I experienced such emotions, since I truly felt anything at all. And now, out of the blue, there stood this young man who had awakened a feeling within me, a feeling I believed had faded into oblivion. His reappearance took me by surprise. I imagined he had likely convinced himself that returning was not an option, that it was simply impossible to come back. However, approximately a week later, my phone began to ring. The number was unfamiliar, yet upon answering, I found it was him on the line. "Hello, this is Jacob, your plumber. I was merely reaching out to inquire if all is well with the sink. Did the solution endure?" His voice carried a veneer of politeness, a touch of professionalism, yet I could discern the subtle tremor lurking beneath. His nervousness sent a thrill through me, more than I was willing to acknowledge. "Oh, Jacob," I remarked, striving to maintain a light-hearted tone, even though I was fully aware of the direction this was headed. "It's amusing that you bring this up. The sink is perfectly fine. However, there's another matter in the bathroom that I was hoping you could examine. I suspect it may be nothing significant, yet I would feel uneasy if I didn't seek a professional's opinion on the matter." A silence lingered on the other end of the line. I could sense him deliberating, contemplating the choice of returning. "I can arrive in approximately an hour," he finally declared. As I ended the call, a smile crept across my face, unbidden and warm. This time I was resolute in my decision not to grant him an easy escape. Upon Jacob's arrival, it was clear that he bore a greater sense of nervousness than during his initial visit. He endeavored to uphold his typical composed, professional facade, yet I could perceive the strain in his shoulders, the manner in which he averted his eyes as I guided him upstairs to the bathroom. The problem with the faucet was trivial, merely a loose handle, yet I understood it wasn't the faucet that lured him back. While he toiled, I lingered close by, observing him quietly. The atmosphere surrounding us crackled with a palpable tension, a sensation that sent shivers across my skin. He maintained a sharper focus this time, his head bowed, eyes fixed on the task at hand. Yet, I sensed a heightened awareness of my presence, a keen recognition of the distance that lay between us. At last, I succumbed to the temptation. "Jacob," I murmured gently, taking a step closer, "your presence has been on my mind lately." He lingered for a heartbeat, his grip on the faucet growing more resolute. He kept his gaze fixed downward, yet I noticed the stark whiteness of his knuckles and the subtle quickening of his breath. "You possess." His voice carried a hint of hesitation, as if he were uncertain about whether to confront the events of the past. "Last time has lingered in my mind," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper, drawing him closer. "Your curiosity was evident, yet you refrained from expressing it fully. What was the reason for that?" Initially, he remained silent, his hand continuing its task on the faucet, yet the turmoil in his eyes was unmistakable. "It is merely, I'm a professional," he said at last, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "It simply wouldn't be appropriate." "Would it not?" I inquired, moving even nearer now. The warmth emanated from him, enveloping the space around us. "Who determines what is right or wrong? Jacob, we are both adults now, navigating our own paths. We are both aware that there exists a connection, an undeniable bond between us. Can you sense it, too?" He gazed at me then, his jaw tight, his eyes brimming with the same turmoil that had lingered during our last encounter. His struggle was evident to me. He exerted every effort to maintain professionalism, to uphold that barrier between us. Yet the tension had escalated beyond the point of no return, and I had no intention of letting it slip away now. My fingers grazed his chest, sensing the rapid thrum of his heartbeat beneath my touch. His breath caught in his throat, and for an instant, I feared he might retreat once more. Suddenly, without any forewarning, he seized my arm, drawing me closer to him. It lacked harshness, yet it possessed a certain solidity. His face hovered mere inches from mine, his breath a warm whisper against my skin. "Margaret," he murmured, his voice deep and charged with emotion. "This is no mere game." "I never said it was," I replied, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. The point of no return had been reached. Jacob's hands lingered on my arm, a blend of strength and uncertainty, as though he feared the moment of release. His expression now held a certain rawness and vulnerability, shedding the nervous politeness that had characterized his demeanor earlier. His gaze captured mine, and I sensed the tension between us transform into something profound, something infinitely more perilous. I drew nearer, allowing my lips to linger mere inches from his. His grip tightened just enough, as if he were simultaneously drawing me nearer while attempting to distance himself from me. For a fleeting instant, I pondered whether he might falter, whether he would step through the door and vanish from my life forever. Yet, in that moment, his breath became rapid, and I realized he was experiencing the very sensation that coursed through me. At times, one must simply release their grip, I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper yet imbued with an undeniable weight. Jacob paused for a fleeting moment, and then, as if a dam had broken within him, he drew me in tighter and pressed his lips against mine. This kiss was no longer gentle or tentative as it had been in the past. It carried the heavy burden of all we had kept hidden from each other. His lips pressed against mine with an intensity that sent a thrill coursing through me, his hands clutching my waist as though he feared the moment would slip away. I kissed him in return, my arms encircling his neck, drawing him nearer, sensing the warmth between us intensifying with each passing moment. The surroundings faded into a haze, the bathroom, the sink, the persistent leak, all vanished as his touch enveloped me completely. His hands glided to my hips, and I sensed the tautness in his form, the struggle within him, hesitant to cross the line yet already lost in the moment. We separated briefly to regain our breath, our foreheads gently touching, our breaths coming in ragged, uneven gasps. His heart thudded against his chest, a rapid pulse thrumming beneath my fingertips. The gaze he cast upon me revealed all I required to understand. This was far more than a fleeting lapse in his resolve. This was a battle he had waged for what felt like an eternity, a truth he had been reluctant to acknowledge within himself. "What now?" he inquired, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper, his gaze probing mine for the answers he sought. I smiled, retreating slightly to grant him a measure of space, yet remaining close enough to maintain our connection. The magnetic force between us was palpable, an undeniable bond that had led us to this moment. "I believe you already possess the answer to that, Jacob," I murmured gently, my voice imbued with a serene assurance that had eluded me for years. "We have already crossed the threshold. What reason is there to halt at this moment?" For a brief moment, silence enveloped us as he stood there, his gaze fixed on me, the turmoil still dancing in his eyes. Yet, with a final look at the door, he reached for me once more, his hands returning to my waist, drawing me nearer. This moment was marked by unwavering resolve, devoid of any doubt or reconsideration. In that moment we were acutely aware of our intentions. The remainder of that afternoon slipped away in a haze. Jacob and I emerged from the bathroom, the tension that had enveloped us finally dissipating in a manner that was both unavoidable and thrilling. His hands roamed freely, exploring my shoulders, my waist, my hips, his touch a blend of firmness and respect, as though he were relinquishing control while still clinging to a thread of restraint. Yet I craved freedom, not now. It had been years since I experienced such feelings, not since the time before the divorce. For what felt like an eternity, my existence had been steeped in monotony. Solitary dinners, tranquil evenings spent before the flickering screen, and the rare phone call from my adult children. I had not fully grasped the depth of my longing for this, the profound need to experience that sense of being wanted and desired once more. Jacob pressed his lips against mine with fervor, his kisses wandering down my neck, while his hands found their way to my hips, holding me close. A gentle gasp escaped my lips, my head tilting back as I surrendered to the moment. Being with him was intoxicating, this young, strong man who appeared to perceive me in a manner that had eluded me for far too long. It transcended mere physical attraction. It was a bond that delved deeper, an unexpected connection that neither of us could bring ourselves to deny. We finally found ourselves in the bedroom, the atmosphere thick with a palpable energy that I hadn't experienced in years. As we lay entwined in the sheets, a smile crept across my face, a sensation of vitality coursing through me, as if I had awakened from a long slumber. "I've never done anything like this," Jacob murmured, his voice low and husky as he lay beside me, his fingers tracing languid circles on my arm. "Neither have I confessed, my voice equally gentle. He turned to face me, his expression brimming with an unexpected emotion, vulnerability. I shouldn't have, he admitted, a slight shake of his head accompanying his words, but I don't regret it. I rested my hand on his chest, sensing the rhythm of his heartbeat under my fingertips, and offered a gentle smile. I feel the same way. We remained in silence for a time, each of us adrift in our own reflections. The gravity of the recent events lingered in the space between us, yet it was not an unwelcome presence. It felt as though we had both ventured beyond an invisible boundary, one we had been unaware of, yet neither of us wished to retreat from. At last, Jacob propped himself up, casting a fleeting look at the clock. I should go, he said, his voice heavy with a reluctance that echoed my own feelings. I find myself here far beyond my initial intentions. You don't have to, I said, fully aware that he couldn't remain. He paused, his gaze lingering on me as if he yearned to remain, yet ultimately, he shook his head. I don't want this to be awkward, he said, his voice a gentle yet resolute whisper. I hope you don't assume I was merely, A smile crept across my face as I grasped the essence of his words. I do not, I replied, propping myself up beside him. Jacob, you possess a commendable character. We both required this moment, and I find solace in its occurrence, yet I hold no expectations beyond what it has been. He appeared relieved, yet a trace of confusion lingered in his eyes, as if he were unaccustomed to such simplicity. Are you truly at ease with all of this? Are there no strange emotions or sensations at all? I chuckled gently, a smile playing on my lips as I shook my head. Absolutely not, Jacob, no strange emotions here. It was simply one of those moments, devoid of strings and free from pressure. He nodded slowly, as though he were still grappling with the sheer simplicity of it all. Very well, he finally replied after a lengthy silence. It seems our paths will cross again soon. Perhaps, I remarked, playfully nudging him just a touch. If my sync were to break once more, you would undoubtedly be the first person I reach out to. That brought a smile to his face, and he rose to his feet, collecting his tools and slinging his bag over his shoulder. Yet, just before he departed, he glanced back at me one final time. Margaret, he murmured, his tone gentle yet brimming with earnestness. I have no regrets. I simply wish to convey this to you. A smile crept across my face as I observed him pushing the door open. I feel the same way, and just like that, he vanished into thin air. In the days that ensued, my thoughts lingered on Jacob far more than was prudent. Each time I strolled by the sink, the memory of his gaze lingered in my mind, the subtle tremor of his hands when I brushed against his arm echoing in the air. The memory of his kiss lingered, the warmth of his body pressing against mine, the moment of hesitation before he surrendered completely. It had been an eternity since I had experienced that sensation since the moment I had felt anything akin to it. His call caught me by surprise. I imagined he had likely persuaded himself that it was merely a fleeting occurrence, one that ought not to repeat itself. Perhaps he was correct. Perhaps it never ought to have transpired at all. Yet, I felt no regret, not even for an instant. Yet, uncertainty lingered in my mind about whether our paths would cross once more. I found myself uncertain about whether I truly desired to proceed. The logical side of my mind recognized the perilous ground we were treading upon, aware of the age difference, the imbalance of power, the weight of societal norms, and the tangible risk that we were flirting with danger. Yet, the part of me that had experienced such vitality in his embrace remained indifferent to all of it. I was certain that if he reached out, I would find it impossible to refuse. One afternoon, roughly a week after his departure, my phone began to ring. As his name illuminated my phone screen, a flutter of excitement surged through me. It caught me off guard, a surprise I hadn't dared to wish for. Yet there it lay before me. His name, his number, an invitation to revisit the excitement of our past connection. His voice was tentative, cautious, as if he were uncertain about whether he should be making the call. I simply wished to inspect the faucet, to ensure that all remains in proper working order. A moment of silence hung in the air, and I could sense the hesitation in his voice, as if he were attempting to reassure himself that this remained merely a business conversation. Yet we were both aware of the truth beneath the surface. "The faucet is fine," I replied, allowing my voice to lower just enough to convey that my words extended beyond the mere sink. "However, there is an additional matter that you may be able to assist me with." Yet another moment of stillness. I could almost sense his heartbeat quickening on the other end of the line, the pause that revealed he was weighing his choices, contemplating whether he should return. "I'll be there in an hour," Jacob said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he were uncertain about the choice he had just made. Yet, I understood within the depths of my being that, once more, he was unable to keep his distance, just as I found it impossible to refrain from inviting him back. As I ended the call, a surge of excitement enveloped me. It had been ages since I experienced such exhilaration, a blend of anxious energy and unbridled longing surging through me like an electric current. I reassured myself that it was merely a fleeting indulgence, devoid of significance, ephemeral in nature. Yet, the reality was that it had transcended into something greater. I wandered through the house for the next hour, tidying items that hardly required any adjustment, struggling to quell the surge of exhilaration swelling within me. This was not characteristic of me. I had always prided myself on my composure, on my ability to remain grounded and not succumb to the allure of reckless abandon. Yet, in Jacob's presence, the meticulously erected barriers I had fortified throughout the years began to disintegrate. Upon his arrival, a familiar surge of emotion washed over me once more. He lingered in the doorway, uncertainty etched on his face, yet undeniably captivated by the magnetic connection that tethered us together. Our gazes intertwined, and I caught a glimpse of that familiar flicker of uncertainty that lingered since our last encounter. Yet, beneath the surface, there lingered an additional element, one that was shrouded in shadows, more profound and gripping. He crossed the threshold. The palpable tension between us intensified. Silence enveloped us as I guided him toward the bathroom, feigning a minor problem that required attention, yet we were both acutely aware of the true reason for his presence. Once we found ourselves alone in the bathroom, the atmosphere around us transformed. Jacob endeavored to concentrate on the task before him, his hands toying with the faucet, yet I noticed the subtle tremor in his fingers. He felt a flutter of nerves, and I mirrored that unease, not just about our actions, but even more so about the depth of my desire for this moment. I moved in closer, observing him feign an examination of the faucet, his body taut, his gaze unwaveringly focused on the task at hand. The stillness enveloping us was dense, laden with unvoiced longing. At last I reached my breaking point. I extended my hand, gently resting it on his shoulder, sensing the warmth of his skin beneath the fabric of his shirt. Jacob stiffened at my touch, his whole form becoming tense. For a fleeting instant, he remained still, not a single breath escaping his lips. Yet, gradually, he pivoted to confront me, his gaze brimming with the familiar turmoil I had witnessed earlier. "Jacob," I murmured, my tone gentle yet firm, "no need for pretense any longer." His breath caught in his throat, and for an instant, I feared he would retreat once more, that he would vanish as he had before. Yet, a transformation occurred within him. His demeanor altered, his determination faltered, and his barriers began to fall apart. In silence, he enveloped me in his embrace, his lips meeting mine with an intensity that stole my breath away. This time it felt distinct. There existed neither hesitation nor second-guessing. This time Jacob unleashed his full potential. His hands explored my body, each touch imbued with a fervent urgency that sent shivers cascading down my spine. I returned his kiss, my fingers weaving through his hair as I drew myself nearer, surrendering to the fervor of the moment. We pressed on, unwavering, determined not to falter this time. The bathroom seemed stifling, a cramped space for the intensity unfolding between us. With the kiss unbroken, Jacob swept me off my feet, transporting me to the bedroom where all barriers between us vanished completely. The moments that ensued became a whirlwind of feeling and perception, the outside world dissolving as we surrendered to the longing we had both endeavored to suppress. Jacob's hands glided over my body with a sense of reverence, a yearning that mirrored my own, and in those fleeting moments, nothing else held significance. A surge of vitality coursed through me, a sensation more vivid than I had experienced in years. It felt as though the years had dissolved, leaving behind a version of myself unrecognizable. A woman who had once been ensnared in the monotony of daily rituals, lost in the profound solitude of a vast, empty home. In Jacob's presence, I experienced a profound sense of being wanted, of being desired. There existed neither shame nor guilt, only the fervent heat that enveloped us and the unspoken recognition that we both craved this connection. Jacob's touch embodied a delicate balance of tenderness and insistence, intertwining control with liberation. He kissed me with an unexpected hunger, his lips roaming over mine with a fervor that sent my heart racing. I returned his kiss with the same intensity, drawing him nearer, determined not to let this moment escape us. As we lay entwined in the aftermath, our bodies weary, a profound silence enveloped us. The space between us felt warm and reassuring, rather than uncomfortable. Jacob's breath brushed against my neck, slow and steady, while his fingers wandered, tracing delicate patterns on my skin. I shut my eyes, relishing the warmth of his body beside me, the comforting weight of his presence. Silence enveloped us, stretching on for what felt like an eternity, as words became unnecessary in that moment. We both understood that what had just transpired was far beyond a mere instance of fleeting desire. It was an uncharted depth, an unexpected revelation that neither of us could bring ourselves to ignore. After years of feeling overlooked, I finally experienced the profound sensation of being truly recognized, not merely as a 60-year-old woman, nor as someone's ex-wife, but as an individual, as a woman who still possessed the ability to feel, to desire, to embrace life. Yet, reality possesses an uncanny ability to seep back in, regardless of how fervently one attempts to keep it at a distance. As the hours unfolded, I sensed the heaviness of the events that had transpired enveloping me. Jacob was youthful, so strikingly younger than I, and although the age gap had felt insignificant in the fervor of the moment, I understood it was a reality that couldn't be overlooked indefinitely. I cast a sidelong look at Jacob, who remained sprawled beside me, his eyes shut, his breath steady and tranquil. He appeared at ease, yet I couldn't help but ponder the duration of that ease. How much time passed before he grasped the intricacies of our actions? What was the duration before he began to distance himself? A shiver of dread coursed through me at the mere thought of it. I never anticipated this. I never intended to experience anything beyond a fleeting attraction. Yet, as I lay here next to him, I realized it transcended mere affection. I found myself deeply connected to him, more so than I had ever planned. I rose gently, taking care not to disturb his slumber, and cocooned myself in the warmth of the blanket. I gazed through the window, observing the final glimmers of the afternoon sun slipping away behind the trees, casting the room in a gentle golden light. I was acutely aware that this moment was fleeting. The logical side of my mind recognized that this was but a momentary experience, that the connection we had forged was ephemeral. Yet, there existed another facet of my being, one that had remained unrecognized until this moment, yearning for permanence, desiring Jacob's presence to endure, and that thought filled me with dread. The subsequent days unfolded with an odd blend of yearning and doubt. Jacob and I kept meeting, yet an undeniable shift had occurred. He remained kind, ever attentive, yet an invisible chasm had formed between us, a silent tension that neither of us could overlook. It was clear to me that his actions were not deliberate. Jacob was desperately clinging to the remnants of what we once shared. Yet, each moment spent in his presence revealed the turmoil swirling within his gaze. He was youthful, with a future brimming with possibilities, and I found myself pondering whether he had begun to question the journey we had embarked upon. The age difference, once a thrilling taboo, now cast a shadow over us, looming large and undeniable. It was impossible to ignore the way others regarded us in public, their inquisitive glances and critical stares piercing through the air. It was inconsequential that being with Jacob rejuvenated me, that he stirred a sense of vitality within me that had long lain dormant. To those who looked upon us, we appeared as an anomaly, a presence that seemed out of place. As we lounged on the couch one evening, I started to sense the heavy burden of that judgment pressing down on me. Jacob extended his hand toward mine, his touch radiating warmth and solace. Yet a shadow lingered in his gaze that caused my heart to plummet. "I've been pondering," he remarked, his tone uncertain as if he were searching for the right words, "about our relationship." A lump formed in my throat, yet I nodded, encouraging him to go on. "This is complicated, Margaret," he said, his voice a gentle yet resolute whisper. "I harbor no regrets, yet I find myself at a loss on how to navigate this situation effectively." Understanding dawned upon me. The weight of this conversation loomed over me, a shadow I could no longer avoid, though I had dreaded its arrival. We had traversed a boundary, and now we found ourselves grappling with the uncertainty of our position. "There's no need for an explanation," I said, my voice steady despite the rapid thumping of my heart. "This is undoubtedly a challenging situation." Jacob gazed at me, his eyes brimming with an unexpected sorrow. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but I can no longer pretend that this is normal." His words struck me with the force of a blow, yet I willed myself to maintain my composure. I had sensed this moment approaching, aware that our bond was precariously constructed, destined not to endure indefinitely. Yet, awareness did little to alleviate the burden. Following that exchange, the fabric of our relationship started to fray. Though we continued to meet, the effortless closeness that had once defined our connection had vanished, supplanted by a lingering awkwardness that neither of us could seem to dispel. Jacob's gradual withdrawal was palpable, a subtle yet undeniable shift, despite his efforts to conceal it. Reluctantly, I faced the truth. Fear gripped me. The thought of losing him haunted me, as did the prospect of returning to my former existence. The hushed solitude of my home, the endless, vacant days that loomed ahead. It all felt insufferable now, after everything I had experienced with Jacob. As dusk settled, I found myself in solitude within the living room, my gaze fixed on the phone, silently urging it to ring. Jacob had assured me he would stop by that afternoon. Yet as the hours slipped by, his absence loomed larger, leaving no trace of his presence. A tight knot of anxiety began to coil within my chest. He was drifting away, and I felt powerless to halt the inevitable. At long last, after what seemed like an endless stretch of time, my phone vibrated. A message from Jacob arrived, expressing his regrets. "He won't be able to join tonight. I require a moment to reflect." The words on the screen held me captive, a weight settling in my chest. I had anticipated this moment, yet witnessing it laid bare in stark contrast brought an undeniable weight to its reality. I remained silent, uncertain of how to reply. Instead, I remained seated in the darkness, the stillness of the house enveloping me like an inescapable burden. The exhilaration that once coursed through my veins had vanished, leaving behind an unexpected void of emptiness. I had believed this was merely a fleeting affair, a spark to ignite my spirit for a brief moment before we both drifted apart. Yet it had evolved into something greater. I had allowed myself to care for him, and now I was facing the consequences. A week slipped by, and Jacob remained silent. I endeavored to occupy my time, immersing myself in activities that held little significance. Yet the void lingered by my side, relentless and unyielding. A lingering sense of finality enveloped me, as if the bond we once cherished was quietly unraveling, slipping away like grains of sand through my fingers. My fingers quivered, and I found myself powerless to halt the trembling. As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, my phone began to ring. It was Jacob. "May I come over?" he inquired, his voice soft, tinged with uncertainty. "Certainly," I responded, fully aware of what lay ahead. Upon his arrival, an unfamiliar tension hung in the air, a palpable shift from the atmosphere that had existed prior. He appeared weary, as if sleep had eluded him for days, and the struggle was evident in every crease of his visage. We settled into the living room, the air thick with the weight of unvoiced thoughts. I lingered in silence, watching as he wrestled with his words, the weight of unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. "Margaret," he began, his voice gentle and low, "a great deal of contemplation has occupied my mind lately." I nodded, my heart racing within my chest. "I care about you," he continued, his gaze firmly fixed on mine. "I find myself feeling more than I ever imagined possible. Yet I realize I cannot continue down this path. The disparity in our ages is something I cannot overlook. This situation is undeniably complex." Tears threatened to spill from the corners of my eyes, yet I held them at bay, resolute in my desire to remain composed. I had anticipated this moment, yet it offered no solace. "I comprehend," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Jacob gazed at me, his face etched with remorse. "Margaret, it pains me to say this, but I believe it would be wise for us to part ways now, before the situation becomes even more tangled." I nodded, my silence betraying the struggle to articulate a response. From the very beginning, I understood that this moment was fleeting, yet that awareness did nothing to diminish the ache that lingered within me. Jacob extended his hand toward mine, enveloping it in a gentle squeeze, as though seeking to offer me comfort in a moment that provided scant reassurance. His touch was warm and familiar, yet it carried a sense of distance, reminiscent of a fleeting memory that was gradually fading from grasp. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice heavy with feeling. "I never intended for things to reach this point, yet I find myself at a loss for how to make it all come together." I gazed at him, my heart shattering softly within me. He was correct. We had traversed a boundary that had seemed thrilling in the moment, yet now the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. The disparity in our ages, the shroud of secrecy, the ambiguity of our potential path, it all felt overwhelming, and we were acutely aware of it. "I harbor no regrets," I murmured, my voice unwavering even as a lump formed in my throat. "I would prefer that you not hold that thought." Jacob's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, I sensed a glimmer of hesitation, as if he were weighing his choice anew. Yet, in an instant, it vanished. "I don't either," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't keep pretending that this is something it's not." I nodded, fully aware that silence was the only response left to offer. We had experienced something genuine, something exquisite, yet it was not destined to endure, and that was the most challenging aspect of all, coming to terms with the reality that some moments, no matter how intense they seem at the time, are not meant to last eternally. For a brief interlude, we remained in quietude, his hand gently encircling mine. It felt as though we were both grasping at the final remnants of what we once shared, fully aware that it was already eluding our fingers. At last, Jacob rose to his feet, his motions measured and intentional, as if he were allowing himself a moment to absorb the unfolding events. He surveyed the room, seemingly etching it into his mind, before turning his gaze back to me. "Take care of yourself, Margaret," he murmured softly. "You as well, Jacob," I responded, my tone steady yet heavy with the unspoken truths lingering between us. He hesitated for a brief moment, then pivoted and made his way to the door. I observed him depart, my heart heavy with an unexpected ache. The door whispered shut behind him, and in an instant, he vanished from sight. The house was enveloped in an unbearable stillness after he departed, the silence weighing down on me like a dense mist. I lingered in that moment, fixated on the door, attempting to unravel the whirlwind of emotions that had unfolded. The exhilaration, the bond, the fervor. It had all been genuine, yet now it had come to an end. With a deliberate slowness, I rose, my limbs weighed down by fatigue, and navigated toward the bedroom. The bed loomed large and desolate in his absence, and as I reclined in the shadows, a nagging thought crept in. Had I erred in my choice? Had I allowed myself to descend too deeply? Had I permitted myself to experience emotions too deeply? Yet, as the waves of sorrow enveloped me, I understood that I would not alter a single detail. What I had confided in Jacob stirred a dormant sensation within me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It served as a poignant reminder of my enduring capacity for desire, for passion, for life itself, and for that, I shall forever hold gratitude. The subsequent days seemed to stretch out, each moment unfolding at a languid pace. The tranquil rhythms of my existence resumed, the well-known sequences, the identical voids. Yet a shift had occurred. Though Jacob had departed, the ember he had rekindled within me continued to glow, stubbornly resisting the darkness of oblivion. He frequently occupied my thoughts. I found myself pondering his actions, contemplating the emotions that might be stirring within him. Though I understood that concluding our journey was the wisest choice for us both, the ache of yearning lingered on. It hung in the shadows, a subtle pain that eluded my grasp. In an effort to divert my mind, I engaged in a series of minor endeavors. Tidying up the house, arranging my bookshelves with care, and strolling through the neighborhood for extended periods. Yet, regardless of my efforts, the echoes of Jacob remained nestled in the recesses of my thoughts, taunting me with the tantalizing notion of what might have been. One afternoon, while sifting through a collection of old photo albums, I stumbled upon a photograph of my younger self, brimming with vitality and exuberance. I gazed at it for what felt like an eternity, attempting to bridge the gap between the woman captured in the photograph and the woman I had transformed into. For countless years, I endeavored to conform to the expectations placed upon me, to be the ideal wife, the perfect mother, and a responsible adult. Yet, in that pursuit, I found myself adrift, having relinquished a fragment of my very essence. Jacob brought to mind that segment, the segment that yearned for adventure, for connection, for something beyond merely existing day by day. Despite the conclusion of our relationship, a sense of gratitude washed over me for the moments we had experienced together. He had bestowed upon me an unexpected gift, a gentle nudge that I was indeed alive, still capable of experiencing the depths of emotion. Weeks morphed into months. Gradually, the pain of longing for Jacob started to diminish. It didn't vanish entirely. There were still instances when he crossed my mind, when I sensed that familiar pull of yearning. Yet, those moments dwindled, and the void within my heart started to be occupied by something new: acceptance. I realized that our relationship had served as a fleeting escape from the dullness of my existence, a momentary yet profound bond that had rekindled my sense of self. Though it was fleeting, it fulfilled its intended role. A transformation had taken place within me. I sensed it in my posture, in the manner I faced each day that unfolded before me. The once oppressive silence that enveloped my home now seemed to have softened its grip. I discovered a path to reclaim my territory, to once more make it distinctly mine. I began to rekindle connections with old friends, reaching out to those I hadn't conversed with in years. I became a member of a local book club, an endeavor I had longed to pursue but had never found the time to embrace. In the quiet of my afternoons, I embraced the art of painting, immersing myself in vibrant hues and boundless creativity that enveloped me in a tranquility I had long forgotten. Amidst the chaos, I held the memory of Jacob close, nestled in a serene corner of my heart. I neither lingered on it nor dismissed it outright. This chapter had woven itself into the fabric of my narrative, playing a crucial role in the evolution of who I was becoming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the sky, I sat on the back porch, a glass of wine cradled in my hand, reflecting on the months that had passed since Jacob's departure. The heavens were adorned in hues of rose and gilded tones, the atmosphere refreshing and brisk, whispering the arrival of autumn. In that moment of stillness, a revelation dawned upon me, one that had eluded my awareness until now. I found solace not only in the tranquil, solitary existence I had painstakingly reconstructed, but also in the profound understanding that I had truly lived, that I had permitted myself to experience something genuine, even if it was fleeting. Jacob entered my life like a sudden storm, and just as swiftly, he vanished into the ether. Yet, the impression he had etched upon my soul endured. He had reminded me that life need not adhere to a predetermined course, that often the most profound experiences arise from the most unforeseen sources. As I savored a sip of my wine, a smile crept across my face, my thoughts drifting toward the possibilities that lay ahead. It was shrouded in uncertainty, naturally, The path ahead remained a mystery to me. Yet, for the first time in what felt like ages, I found myself unafraid of the uncertainties that lay ahead. I unearthed a fragment of my being that I once believed was gone for good, and that alone was sufficient. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, I rose and ventured indoors. The house exuded warmth and hospitality, shedding its former identity as a cold, desolate space. It belonged to me now, a mirror of my essence and the person I was evolving into. As I gently shut the door, a subtle wave of hope washed over me. Whatever lay ahead, I was certain I could confront it, for I had already endured the most challenging aspect, the act of letting go.